The autumn air in Chicago carried that peculiar blend of cold and dampness that seemed to seep through even the thickest jackets. Emily Parker stood outside the brownstone in Lincoln Park, watching her breath form small clouds in the October night. The bass from inside vibrated through the brick walls, mixing with the sounds of laughter and conversation that spilled onto the quiet residential street. She pulled her navy blue cardigan tighter around her shoulders, suddenly questioning why she'd come at all. Through the large front windows she could see the party in full swing. Groups of people clustered together, drinks in hand, bodies swaying to the music. 22 years old, and she still felt like an outsider looking in. You coming in, or are you going to stand out here all night? Emily turned to see Jessica, her roommate, standing in the doorway with an exasperated expression. Jessica had been the one to drag her here, insisting that Emily needed to live a little after spending the past 3 weeks buried in textbooks preparing for her teaching certification exams. "I'm coming," Emily replied, forcing a smile as she climbed the stone steps. The moment she stepped inside, the warmth hit her like a wave. The apartment was packed with people, most of them in their mid-20s, dressed in clothes that screamed effortless confidence. Emily immediately felt underdressed in her simple jeans and white blouse, her shoulder-length brown hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Jessica disappeared almost immediately, swallowed by a group of friends near the kitchen. Emily made her way through the crowd, murmuring apologies as she squeezed past clusters of conversation she wasn't part of. She found a relatively quiet corner near a bookshelf and tried to look occupied, examining the spines of books she had no intention of reading. Emily Parker, right? She looked up to find Marcus Chen standing in front of her, holding 2 red cups. She recognized him from her communications class at DePaul University. He was one of those naturally charismatic people who seemed to know everyone and fit in everywhere. "That's me," she said, accepting the cup he offered. She sniffed it cautiously. "Fruit punch and something stronger. Thought you could use a drink. You look like you're planning an escape route," Marcus said with a knowing smile. Emily laughed despite herself. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone who's felt the same way at these things," he admitted. "But hey, you're here now. Might as well make the most of it." They talked for a while. Easy conversation about classes, professors, and their mutual disdain for the university's new parking regulations. Emily felt herself beginning to relax, the tension in her shoulders easing. Maybe Jessica had been right. Maybe she did need this. "There you are." The voice was sharp and carried across the noise of the party. Emily turned to see Vanessa Hartley approaching, flanked by 2 other women Emily vaguely recognized from campus. Vanessa was everything Emily wasn't. Blonde, perfectly styled, with the kind of confidence that came from never having to question whether she belonged somewhere. "Marcus, darling, I've been looking everywhere for you," Vanessa said, completely ignoring Emily as she looped her arm through Marcus's. Emily noticed the slight stiffening in Marcus's posture, the way his easy smile became more forced. "Vanessa, you remember Emily from—" "Oh, I know who she is," Vanessa interrupted, finally acknowledging Emily with a look that felt like a physical assessment. "You're the girl who sits in the front row of every class, right? Always raising your hand?" There was something in her tone that made it sound like an accusation rather than an observation. Emily felt her face growing warm. "I just like to participate," Emily said quietly. "How admirable," Vanessa replied, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "It must be nice to have so much free time to dedicate to academics. Some of us have actual social lives to maintain." One of Vanessa's friends giggled. Emily felt her stomach tighten. Marcus cleared his throat. "Vanessa, that's not—" "Oh, Marcus, I'm just teasing," Vanessa said, waving her hand dismissively. She turned her attention back to Emily, and there was something calculating in her eyes. "Actually, Emily, since you're here, maybe you can help settle a debate we've been having." Emily had a sudden instinct to leave, to make up an excuse and head for the door. But people were starting to notice their conversation, the crowd around them growing quiet with interest. "What kind of debate?" Emily asked, hating how uncertain her voice sounded. Vanessa smiled, and it was the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Well, Brittany here was just saying that she thinks it's desperate when girls dress down at parties, like they're trying too hard to seem different or something. But I said that maybe some people just don't know any better. You know, maybe they weren't raised around this kind of thing." The implication was clear, and Emily felt every eye in the vicinity turned toward her and her simple outfit. Her face burned with embarrassment. "I don't think what someone wears to a party really matters that much," Emily managed to say. "Oh, honey, everything matters," Vanessa replied. "The way you present yourself tells people who you are. It's about respect, for yourself And for the people hosting. She gestured around the apartment. Brandon went through a lot of trouble to throw this party. The least people could do is make an effort. Emily's hands were shaking now. She set down her cup on a nearby table, afraid she might drop it. I should probably go. Wait, we're not done with our debate, Vanessa said, stepping closer. Her voice had gotten louder, ensuring that more people could hear. I mean, you're studying to be a teacher, right? Don't you think it's important to teach young people about making good impressions? About understanding social contexts? Vanessa, seriously, stop, Marcus interjected, but his voice was drowned out by the growing audience. I'm genuinely curious, Vanessa continued, her eyes locked on Emily, because I'm looking at you right now, and I'm trying to understand what statement you're making. Is it, I don't care? Or is it, I don't know how? Help me understand. Someone in the crowd snickered. Emily felt her throat tightening, tears threatening to form. This couldn't be happening. Not here. Not in front of all these people. I think the statement is I came here to have a good time, not to impress anyone, Emily said, trying to keep her voice steady. Vanessa laughed. A bright, crystalline sound that felt like shattering glass. Oh, sweetie, you can't have a good time if you're too busy being invisible. Look around. Do you see anyone else here dressed like they're about to study at the library? Emily did look around, and the horrible truth was that Vanessa was right. Everyone else had clearly put thought into their appearance. Even Marcus, in his casual button-down and dark jeans, looked effortlessly put together. Emily felt like a child who'd wandered into an adult gathering. You know what? I think the kindest thing I can do is be honest with you, Vanessa said, her voice taking on a tone of false concern. This isn't your scene, Emily, and that's okay. Not everyone is meant for this kind of thing. Some people are more comfortable with books and quiet libraries. There's no shame in that. But the way she said it made it clear that there was shame. Heaps of it. Emily felt something breaking inside her. All the confidence she'd managed to build up over the past few years. All the work she'd done to come out of her shell felt like it was crumbling. She was that awkward, insecure teenager again, standing on the outside looking in. I need some air, Emily muttered, pushing past Vanessa and her friends. She heard Vanessa call after her, something about not being able to take a joke. But Emily wasn't listening anymore. She just needed to get out, to escape the stares and the whispers that were already starting to spread through the party like wildfire. Emily made it to the front door, her vision blurring with unshed tears. She fumbled with the handle, her hands shaking so badly she could barely grip it. Behind her she could hear the party continuing, the music still playing, people already moving on to the next source of entertainment. She finally got the door open and stumbled onto the front steps, gulping in the cold night air. It stung her throat and made her eyes water even more, but at least out here she could breathe. At least out here she didn't have to face all those judging eyes. Emily sat down on the top step, wrapping her arms around herself. She should call a rideshare and go home. She should leave this whole humiliating night behind her and pretend it never happened. That's what the smart part of her brain was saying. But the other part, the part that hurt, kept replaying every word Vanessa had said, every laugh from the crowd. Every pitying look from Marcus, who'd tried to defend her but hadn't really succeeded. The door opened behind her, and Emily tensed, praying it wasn't Vanessa coming out to finish what she'd started. Rough night? The voice was deep, unfamiliar, and carried a slight accent she couldn't quite place. Emily turned to see a man standing in the doorway. Tall, probably in his early 30s, wearing a dark suit that looked far too expensive for this kind of party. His hair was black and neatly styled, and there was something about the way he carried himself that demanded attention. She'd never seen him before. She would have remembered. You could say that, Emily replied, quickly wiping at her eyes and hoping her face wasn't as red and blotchy as it felt. The man stepped out onto the porch, closing the door behind him. The sounds of the party became muffled, distant. He leaned against the railing, his dark eyes studying her with an intensity that should have made her uncomfortable, but somehow didn't. Those people in there, he said, gesturing toward the door. They're not worth your tears. Emily let out a bitter laugh. Easy for you to say. You look like you belong in there. Appearances can be deceiving, he replied. There was something in his tone, a weariness maybe, or a hint of amusement. I don't belong in there any more than you do. Probably less. They sat in silence for a moment, the only sounds the distant traffic and the muffled bass from inside. Emily found herself calming down despite the strangeness of the situation. I'm Alexander, the man said finally. Emily, she replied. He nodded as if he'd already known. Tell me something, Emily. Do you dance? The question caught her so off guard that she actually laughed. What? Dance, he repeated, straightening up from the railing. Do you know how? Yes. I mean, sort of. Why? Alexander extended his hand toward her, and there was something almost old-fashioned about the gesture. Because I think you should come back inside with me. Emily stared at his hand like it might be a trap. I'm not going back in there. Did you not see what just happened? I saw, Alexander said, his voice quiet but firm. I saw a frightened girl allow small people to make her feel smaller, and I think that's a shame. The words stung because they were true. Emily looked away, fresh tears threatening to fall. But I also saw someone who had the courage to come to a party where she didn't know anyone, who tried to make conversation, who stood up for herself even when it was hard, Alexander continued. And I think that person deserves better than to end her night sitting on cold steps feeling sorry for herself. Emily looked up at him, searching his face for any sign of mockery or pity. She found neither. What she saw instead was something that looked almost like respect. I don't even know you, she said. No, Alexander agreed. But you're about to. He kept his hand extended, waiting. Inside, Emily could hear the music shifting to something slower, more rhythmic. Her heart was pounding, and she couldn't tell if it was from anxiety or something else entirely. This was crazy. She should go home. She should get as far away from this party and these people as possible. Every rational part of her brain was screaming at her to decline, to make an excuse, to run. But there was another part, a smaller, quieter part that she usually ignored, that was tired of running. Tired of letting people like Vanessa make her feel like she didn't deserve to take up space in the world. Emily looked at Alexander's hand one more time. It was steady, patient, unwavering, like he had all the time in the world and wouldn't judge her no matter what she decided. She took a deep breath, tasting the cold October air one last time. Then she reached out and placed her hand in his. Alexander's hand was warm, his grip firm, but not overwhelming. The moment Emily's fingers touched his, she felt a jolt of something she couldn't quite name. Not electricity, nothing so dramatic, but a sense that she'd just made a decision that would change something fundamental. He helped her to her feet, with an ease that suggested strength held carefully in check. Emily was 5'6", average height, but standing next to Alexander made her feel smaller. Not in the way Vanessa had made her feel small, diminished and insignificant, but in a way that felt almost protective. Second thoughts? Alexander asked, noting her hesitation. About 1,000 of them, Emily admitted. The corner of his mouth lifted in what might have been a smile. Good. That means you're smart, but you're still here, which means you're also brave. He opened the door, and the wall of sound hit them again. The party seemed even more crowded than before, bodies packed into every available space. Emily's instinct was to pull back, to retreat to the safety of the steps, but Alexander's hand remained steady in hers. Stay close, he said, not as a command, but as a simple statement of fact. They moved through the crowd, and Emily noticed something strange happening. People were moving aside, not obviously, not in any dramatic way, but there was a subtle parting of bodies as Alexander walked through. People glanced at him, did double takes, and then quickly looked away. Conversations faltered and resumed in hushed tones. Who was this man? Emily caught sight of Jessica near the kitchen, her roommate's eyes going wide when she saw who Emily was with. Jessica mouthed something that looked like, "Oh my God," but Emily couldn't tell if it was concern or excitement. They passed by the group where Vanessa had humiliated her. Emily felt her stomach clench, her steps faltering. Vanessa was mid-sentence, holding court as usual, but she stopped talking the moment she noticed Alexander. Her perfectly glossed lips parted slightly, and something flickered across her face. Surprise, definitely, but also something that looked almost like fear. Alexander Russo, Vanessa said, her voice much quieter than it had been earlier. I didn't know you were coming tonight. Russo. The name meant nothing to Emily, but clearly it meant something to everyone else. Marcus had gone pale. Several people in the surrounding area had suddenly found their phones very interesting. Vanessa, Alexander acknowledged with a slight nod, his tone polite but distant. He didn't stop walking, didn't release Emily's hand. They continued past the group, leaving a wake of stunned silence behind them. You know her? Emily whispered. I know of her, Alexander replied. Her father does business with people I know. She should have learned better manners. The way he said it, calm, almost conversational, somehow made it sound more threatening than if he'd been angry. Emily felt a chill run down her spine that had nothing to do with the temperature. They reached the center of the living room, where someone had pushed back the furniture to create a makeshift dance floor. A few couples swayed to the music, something modern with a steady, hypnotic beat. Alexander turned to face Emily, his dark eyes studying her face. "Having second thoughts number 1001?" he asked. Emily realized she was trembling, not from cold this time, but from the sheer surreality of the situation. 10 minutes ago she'd been sitting on the steps, humiliated and ready to flee. Now she was standing in the middle of the party with a man who seemed to command the room simply by existing in it. "I don't understand what's happening," she said honestly. "We're dancing," Alexander replied simply. "Everything else is just noise." He placed one hand gently on her waist, holding her other hand in his. The position was formal, almost old-fashioned, like something from a different era. Emily had taken ballroom dance classes in high school, her mother's insistence, but she'd never expected to use those skills at a college party. "Follow my lead," Alexander said softly. The music shifted and he began to move. Not the grinding, casual movement that characterized most of the party's dancing, but actual steps, measured, deliberate, graceful. Emily stumbled at first, her sneakers catching on the hardwood floor, but Alexander's grip steadied her. "Don't think," he instructed. "Just feel the rhythm." Emily tried to let go of her self-consciousness, of her awareness that every single person at the party was now watching them. She focused on the music, on the warmth of Alexander's hand at her waist, on the steady pressure of his movements guiding her across the floor, and slowly, impossibly, she began to follow. They moved in a small circle, nothing elaborate or showy, but there was something mesmerizing about the simplicity of it. Alexander led with absolute confidence, and Emily found herself trusting him, letting him guide her through turns she didn't know she could make. "Better," Alexander said, and there was approval in his voice that made Emily's heart skip. She risked a glance up at his face. He was watching her with an intensity that should have been uncomfortable, but his expression was unreadable, not cold, but carefully controlled, like a man who'd learned long ago not to reveal what he was thinking. "Why are you doing this?" Emily asked quietly. "Dancing with you? Helping me. You don't know me. You don't owe me anything." Alexander was quiet for a moment, guiding her through another turn. The music swelled around them, and Emily was dimly aware that the rest of the party had fallen into a hush, everyone watching their impromptu performance. "When I was younger," Alexander said finally, "someone helped me when they didn't have to. They didn't know me. They didn't owe me anything, but they saw someone who needed help, and they provided it." He paused. "I've spent a lot of my life repaying that debt. By dancing with humiliated college students at parties." The corner of his mouth twitched again. "By recognizing when someone deserves better than they're receiving." The song was ending, transitioning into something faster, more energetic. Alexander slowed their movement, bringing them to a gentle stop in the center of the floor. He released her waist but held onto her hand for a moment longer. "Thank you," Emily said, meaning it more than she'd ever meant those words before. Alexander nodded once, then let her hand go. The spell, if that's what it had been, was broken. Sound rushed back in as people returned to their conversations, though Emily could feel eyes still on them, hear the whispers starting up. "Emily!" Jessica appeared at her elbow, grabbing her arm with barely contained excitement. Oh my God, do you know who that was? Do you have any idea?" Emily looked back to where Alexander had been standing, but he'd already moved away, heading toward the kitchen, where a man in a dark jacket was waiting for him. The man leaned in, speaking quietly into Alexander's ear. Alexander's expression remained neutral, but he nodded and glanced back toward Emily once before following the man toward the back of the apartment. "Who is he?" Emily asked. Jessica's eyes were enormous. "Alexander Russo, he's like..." "Emily, he's not someone who comes to parties like this. He's not someone who talks to people like us." "What do you mean?" Jessica pulled Emily toward a quieter corner, away from the main crowd. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "My cousin works downtown in the financial district. She says the Russo family basically owns half of Chicago's commercial real estate. But it's not just that. There are rumors about them, about what else they're involved in." Emily felt her stomach drop. "What kind of rumors?" "The kind people don't talk about too loudly," Jessica said, her expression serious now. "The kind that involve money that doesn't get reported, and problems that get solved without police involvement. Emily, I'm not saying he's a bad person, but he's definitely not normal." Emily looked back toward the kitchen, but Alexander was gone. Through the window, she could see a black car pulling away from the curb. Expensive, sleek, with tinted windows that revealed nothing. "Vanessa looks like she's going to have a heart attack," Jessica added, and there was definite satisfaction in her voice. "I've never seen her so quiet. Whatever you did, however you got his attention, you just became the most talked-about person at DePaul." But Emily wasn't thinking about Vanessa or the other students or what people might say. She was thinking about the weight of Alexander's hand in hers, the careful control in his movements, the way he'd looked at her like she mattered. "I need to sit down," Emily said. Jessica guided her to a couch that had just been vacated by a couple heading for the dance floor. Emily sank into the cushions, her legs suddenly unsteady. The adrenaline that had carried her through the past 20 minutes was draining away, leaving behind a confusing mixture of emotions she couldn't quite process. "Here," Jessica thrust a bottle of water into her hands. "Drink this. You look like you've seen a ghost." Emily took a long drink, the cold water helping to clear her head. Around them, the party was slowly returning to normal, though she caught more than a few curious glances thrown her way. Marcus appeared, looking concerned. "Emily, are you okay? That whole thing with Vanessa was completely out of line." And then, he stopped, shaking his head. "I don't even know what that was." "How do you know Alexander Russo?" "I don't," Emily said. "I mean, I didn't. He just appeared." "People like Alexander Russo don't just appear anywhere," Marcus said. "They show up for reasons." "What reason could he possibly have for being at a random Saturday night party in Lincoln Park?" Emily asked. Marcus and Jessica exchanged a look that Emily couldn't interpret. "Brandon's older brother has business connections," Jessica said carefully. "Real estate development, commercial contracts, that kind of thing. Maybe Alexander was here for a meeting or something and the party was just incidental. But that didn't explain why he'd come outside, why he'd talked to her, why he'd asked her to dance." Emily's phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, expecting a text from her mother or maybe one of her study group friends. Instead, she found a notification from Instagram. Someone had tagged her in a video. Her hands shaking slightly, Emily opened the app. The video had been taken during the dance, filmed from somewhere near the kitchen. It showed her and Alexander moving across the floor, her awkward initial steps giving way to something more fluid, more natural. The way Alexander held her, the careful precision of his movements, the way everyone else had stopped to watch. The caption read, "When a literal mafia boss shuts down your bully by dancing with you." Emily Parker just had the most epic night ever. Mafia boss. The words seemed to pulse on the screen. Emily looked up at Jessica, who had gone very quiet. "Is that true?" Emily asked. "Is he really?" "I don't know," Jessica interrupted quickly. "People say a lot of things. Rumors get exaggerated. The Russo family is powerful, yeah, but that doesn't automatically mean—" She trailed off, unable or unwilling to finish the sentence. Emily looked back at her phone. The video already had over 100 likes and counting. The comments were a mixture of awe, disbelief, and speculation. Someone had even created a hashtag, "Justice for Emily." This was spinning out of control. What had been the worst night of her life had somehow transformed into something else entirely. Something she didn't understand and definitely hadn't asked for. "I want to go home," Emily said quietly. Jessica nodded immediately. "Yeah, of course. Let me grab our coats." As they made their way to the door, Emily felt the weight of attention following her. But it was different now. Not the mocking, dismissive attention from before, but something more complex. Curiosity mixed with respect, mixed with something that might have been fear. Vanessa was standing near the entrance, her perfect composure slightly cracked. She watched Emily approach with an expression Emily had never seen on her face before. Uncertainty. "Emily," Vanessa said as they passed. Her voice had lost all its earlier venom. "I didn't mean, I was just joking around earlier." Emily stopped, looking at the girl who had made her feel so small just an hour ago. Vanessa suddenly seemed smaller herself, diminished not by cruelty but by the simple fact that she'd been proven wrong about who mattered and who didn't. "Yes, you did mean it," Emily said quietly. "But thank you for the apology anyway." She walked out the door without waiting for a response. The cold air hit her face, sharp and cleansing. Jessica's car was parked down the street and they walked toward it in silence. Emily's mind was racing, trying to process everything that had happened, everything that had changed in the span of a single evening. Jessica said as they reached the car. "Whatever happens next, whatever comes from this, I've got your back, okay?" Emily nodded, grateful for the friendship even as she wondered what exactly her roommate thought might happen next. They climbed into the car, And as Jessica pulled away from the curb, Emily looked back at the brownstone one last time. Through the windows, she could see the party continuing, people dancing and laughing and living their lives completely unaware of how dramatically hers had just shifted. Somewhere in the city, Alexander Russo was probably already back to whatever mysterious business occupied his time. He'd likely forgotten about the awkward college student he'd danced with at a random party. It had been a kind gesture from a powerful man, nothing more. But as Emily's phone continued to buzz with notifications, as the video continued to spread across social media, as her name became attached to his in ways she couldn't control, she had a sinking feeling that this wasn't over. Emily didn't sleep that night. She lay in her small bedroom in the apartment she shared with Jessica, staring at the ceiling while her phone buzzed incessantly on the nightstand. She'd turned off the notifications after the first hour, but she could still see the screen lighting up in the darkness, over and over again, like a heartbeat that wouldn't slow down. By Sunday morning, the video had been viewed over 50,000 times. It had spread beyond DePaul, beyond their immediate social circle, picked up by local Twitter accounts and Instagram pages dedicated to Chicago nightlife. Someone had even created a TikTok with dramatic music overlaid, captioning it "main character energy." Emily felt anything but main character energy as she sat at their small kitchen table, nursing a cup of coffee that had gone cold while she scrolled through the comments. "This is insane," Jessica said, looking over Emily's shoulder. "People are calling you Cinderella. They're saying Alexander Russo is your Prince Charming." "Prince Charming doesn't have rumors about criminal connections," Emily muttered. Jessica sat down across from her, her expression serious. I've been thinking, maybe you should stay off campus for a few days. Let this blow over. I have classes tomorrow. I have my student teaching observation on Tuesday. I can't just hide." "I'm not saying hide. I'm saying be careful. You got pulled into something last night, something way bigger than a college party drama. People are going to have questions. They're going to want to know about Alexander, about what he said to you, about whether you're seeing him again." "I'm not seeing him again," Emily said firmly. "It was one dance. He was being kind. That's all." But even as she said it, she remembered the intensity in his eyes, the careful way he'd held her, the whispered conversation that had felt oddly intimate despite the crowd around them. That hadn't felt like simple kindness. It had felt like something else, something she didn't have words for. Her phone rang, an actual call rather than another notification. Emily's heart jumped when she saw the number. Unknown, with a Chicago area code. "Don't answer it," Jessica warned. But Emily's finger was already moving toward the accept button. "Hello? Miss Parker?" The voice was male, professional, unfamiliar. "My name is Vincent Castellano. I work for Mr. Russo. He'd like to speak with you if you have a moment." Emily's hand tightened around the phone. "How did you get this number?" "Mr. Russo has resources," Vincent replied, as if that explained everything. "He's concerned about the attention you've received following last night's events. He'd like to ensure you're handling the situation appropriately." Jessica was making frantic gestures, shaking her head emphatically. Emily ignored her. "Tell Mr. Russo that I'm fine, and I can handle my own situations." There was a pause on the other end. "With respect, Miss Parker, I don't think you understand the nature of the attention you've attracted. This isn't just college gossip anymore. When you associate with someone like Mr. Russo, even briefly, it creates ripples. Some of those ripples can be problematic." "Are you threatening me?" "Absolutely not," Vincent said, and he sounded genuinely shocked. "Mr. Russo would never allow anyone to threaten you. Quite the opposite. He wants to ensure your safety and privacy. That's why he's requesting a meeting." Emily stood up, pacing to the window. Outside Lincoln Park was quiet on Sunday morning, joggers passing by, a young couple walking their dog. Normal people living normal lives, completely unaware that Emily's life had somehow veered into territory she didn't recognize. "When?" she heard herself ask. "This afternoon if you're available. I can send a car to pick you up at 2 o'clock. "No," Emily said quickly. The thought of getting into a car sent by Alexander Russo, of disappearing to some unknown location, sent alarm bells ringing. "I'll meet him somewhere public, somewhere I choose." Another pause. "One moment, please." Emily heard muffled conversation on the other end. Vincent presumably relaying her conditions to someone else. When he came back on the line, his tone was approving. "Mr. Russo agrees to your terms. Where would you like to meet?" Emily thought quickly. "Millennium Park, near the Bean, 3 o'clock. He'll be there. And Miss Parker, thank you for agreeing to this. Mr. Russo doesn't often extend personal meetings. The line went dead. Emily lowered the phone slowly, her heart racing. Jessica was staring at her with an expression somewhere between horror and disbelief. Please tell me you did not just agree to meet with a possibly dangerous man in a public park. You heard him. Public park. Lots of people around. Safer than getting into a stranger's car. Em, this is crazy. You need to think about this. I need to understand what I got pulled into last night, Emily interrupted. And I need to hear it from him directly, not from rumors and gossip and speculation. Jessica opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. She knew Emily well enough to recognize when her roommate had made up her mind. Fine, Jessica said, but I'm coming with you. I'll stay back, give you space, but I'm not letting you do this alone. Emily felt a rush of gratitude. Thank you. The hours until 3 o'clock crawled by. Emily changed her outfit 3 times, finally settling on dark jeans, a warm sweater, and her practical winter jacket. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She just wanted to look like herself, like someone who knew who she was even when her world was tilting sideways. They took the Red Line downtown, the train relatively empty on a Sunday afternoon. Emily watched the city pass by through the windows, the diverse neighborhoods of the North Side giving way to the gleaming towers of downtown Chicago. Somewhere in this city, Alexander Russo was preparing for their meeting. What did a man like that think about? What did he want from her? Millennium Park was bustling despite the October chill. Tourists posed for photos in front of Cloud Gate, the Bean, while street performers entertained small crowds. Emily and Jessica found a bench with a clear view of the sculpture. I'll be right over there, Jessica said, pointing to a coffee cart about 50 yards away. If anything feels wrong, any red flags at all, you text me, and we leave immediately. Deal, Emily agreed. At exactly 3 o'clock, Emily saw him. Alexander walked through the park with the same commanding presence he'd had at the party, but here in daylight, she could see more details. His dark suit was impeccably tailored, probably custom-made. His black hair had a slight wave to it that the dim party lighting had hidden. He wore sunglasses despite the overcast sky, and Emily wondered if it was to hide his eyes or to keep people from recognizing him. He wasn't alone. 2 men flanked him at a discreet distance. Security, Emily realized. They were trying to look casual, but there was an alertness to their posture that gave them away. Alexander spotted her and approached, his security detail hanging back. He removed his sunglasses as he got closer, and Emily was struck again by the intensity of his dark eyes. Miss Parker, he said, thank you for agreeing to meet with me. You made it sound like I didn't have much choice, Emily replied. A slight smile crossed his face. You always have a choice. The fact that you chose to meet me here, in public, on your own terms, tells me a great deal about you. What does it tell you? That you're smarter than I gave you credit for last night. He gestured to the bench. May I? Emily nodded, and they sat down. This close, she could smell his cologne. Something subtle and expensive, cedar and spice. He sat with perfect posture, hands resting on his knees, looking out at the Bean rather than directly at her. I owe you an apology, Alexander said. That wasn't what Emily had been expecting. For what? For putting you in an uncomfortable position last night. I saw someone being treated poorly and I reacted, but I didn't consider the consequences of that reaction. For you. He turned to look at her now. I didn't consider that associating with me, even briefly, would create problems. Emily pulled out her phone and showed him the video, which now had over 100,000 views. I'd say it created more than problems. It created a spectacle. Alexander's jaw tightened as he watched the video. Who filmed this? Does it matter? It's out there now. Everyone knows, or thinks they know, that I danced with Alexander Russo. Do you know what they're calling you in the comments? I can imagine. They're calling you a mafia boss. They're creating romantic narratives about us. Someone even started a petition to make our love story into a movie. Emily laughed, but there was no humor in it. My life was normal 24 hours ago. I was nobody. Now I'm the girl who danced with the dangerous man. Are you afraid of me? Alexander asked quietly. Emily considered the question. She should be afraid. Every rational part of her brain was screaming that she should be terrified. But sitting here next to him in the afternoon light, watching families walk by and children play, she found that fear wasn't what she felt. I don't know what I am, she admitted. Confused, overwhelmed, but not afraid. Not of you anyway. Why not? Because if you wanted to hurt me, you wouldn't have bothered with a meeting. You would have just done whatever it is you do. Alexander was quiet for a long moment. You're right. I wouldn't hurt you. In fact, I've taken steps to ensure that no one else hurts you either. What does that mean? It means that as of this morning, you're under protection. My protection. Not because you asked for it, but because I put you in this position and I take responsibility for that. Emily felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. I don't want protection. I don't want bodyguards following me around campus. You won't see them, Alexander assured her. They're very good at being invisible, but they'll be there, ensuring that the attention you've received doesn't escalate into something dangerous. Dangerous? Who would want to hurt me? I'm nobody. You stopped being nobody the moment that video went online. Alexander's voice was patient, like he was explaining something obvious to a child. There are people in this city who would love to get leverage over me. People who would see a young woman I showed interest in as an opportunity. You didn't show interest in me, Emily protested. You danced with me once. That's not interest, that's charity. Alexander turned to face her fully, and the intensity in his gaze made Emily's breath catch. Do you really think I dance with random strangers out of charity? That I involve myself in college party drama for fun? Then why? Emily demanded. Why me? What could you possibly gain from helping some nobody college student who got humiliated at a party? Because, Alexander said, and his voice dropped lower, when I saw you sitting on those steps, looking like your world had ended over the cruelty of people who aren't worth your time, I saw something familiar. I saw someone who didn't belong in that shallow world but was trying to anyway. Someone who deserved better but didn't know how to claim it. And you do? Know how to claim better? I've spent my entire life claiming what I deserve, Alexander said. Often through means that would horrify you. But last night I had the opportunity to do something good for once. To help someone who needed it. So I did. Emily wanted to argue. To push back against his assertion that she'd needed help. But the truth was she had needed it. She'd been breaking down on those steps, ready to retreat back into her safe, small world where she never took risks and never got hurt. The video needs to come down, she said instead. Can you make that happen? I could, Alexander admitted. But it wouldn't matter. It's already been downloaded and shared thousands of times. Trying to suppress it now would only draw more attention. The Streisand effect. So what am I supposed to do? Just wait for this to blow over? You continue your life, Alexander said simply. You go to your classes. You focus on becoming the teacher you're training to be. You ignore the whispers and the stares, and eventually, they'll find something else to gossip about. Easy for you to say, you're used to this kind of attention. Actually, I despise it, which is why I'm very selective about when and where I appear in public. Last night was unusual for me. Emily looked at him, really looked at him. Beneath the expensive suit and the controlled demeanor, she could see the tension in his shoulders, the slight tightness around his eyes. This wasn't easy for him either. Can I ask you something? Emily said. You can ask. I may not answer. The things people say about you, about your family, about what you're involved in, are they true? Alexander was quiet for so long that Emily thought he wouldn't answer. Then he spoke, his voice careful and measured. My family has been in Chicago for 4 generations. We've built businesses, created jobs, contributed to this city's growth. We've also operated in spaces that exist outside conventional rules, spaces where the law is more of a suggestion than a requirement. He paused. Does that make us criminals? That depends on who you ask and what their definition of crime is. That's not really an answer. It's the only answer I can give you, because the truth is complicated, and you're not ready to hear it. You're a 22-year-old college student studying to be a teacher. You believe in right and wrong, in systems that work, in justice that's fair. I live in a world where none of those things exist in the way you understand them. Then why are we having this conversation? Emily asked. If our worlds are so different, why bother? Alexander stood up, replacing his sunglasses. His security detail immediately moved closer, ready to leave. But before he walked away, he looked down at Emily one last time. Because sometimes different worlds collide, he said. And when they do, interesting things happen. Last night was a collision, Miss Parker. What happens next is up to you. Up to me how? You can go back to your normal life and let this become just a strange story you tell someday. Or, he paused, and Emily had the sense that whatever he was about to say next was important. Or, you can acknowledge that maybe your normal life wasn't quite working for you. That maybe you were sitting on those steps not just because of Vanessa's cruelty, but because you've been feeling out of place for a long time. Maybe you can use this attention, this strange collision, as an opportunity to figure out who you actually want to be. Emily wanted to argue, to tell him he didn't know anything about her life or her feelings, but the words stuck in her throat because they weren't true. He'd somehow identified exactly what she'd been feeling for months, this sense of going through motions, of trying to fit into a life that didn't quite fit her. "I'll have Vincent check in with you periodically," Alexander continued. "Not to intrude, but to ensure you're safe. If you need anything, if anyone bothers you, if the attention becomes threatening, you call the number he gave you. Understood?" "I don't need." "Understood?" Alexander repeated, and this time there was steel in his voice. "Understood," Emily conceded. He nodded once, then walked away. Emily watched him go, watched the way people unconsciously moved out of his path, watched how his security flanked him as they headed toward a black SUV parked on Columbus Drive. Jessica appeared at her elbow moments later, slightly out of breath. "Well, what happened? Are you okay? Did he threaten you?" "No," Emily said slowly. "He didn't threaten me. I'm not sure what he did, actually." They sat back down on the bench, and Emily recounted the conversation. Jessica listened with increasing concern, her eyes growing wider with each detail. This is serious. He's talking about protection, about people wanting leverage, about different worlds colliding. This isn't just some rich guy being nice. This is something real and potentially dangerous." "I know," Emily said, but what she didn't say, what she couldn't quite admit even to herself, was that some part of her found the danger exciting. For 22 years she'd been safe, careful, responsible Emily Parker. She'd followed the rules, made the right choices, never colored outside the lines. And where had it gotten her? Sitting on steps at a party, crying because someone had been mean to her. Her phone buzzed. Another notification about the video, but this time it was different. Someone had identified Alexander in the footage and linked to a news article from 3 years ago about the Russo family's real estate empire. The comments were speculating wildly about why he'd been at the party, what his connection to Emily might be, whether this was the beginning of a romance or just a random act of kindness. "You know what the worst part is?" Emily said quietly. "Part of me wants to see him again. Part of me wants to understand his world even though I know I shouldn't." Jessica put her arm around Emily's shoulders. "That's not the worst part. That's the human part. He's mysterious and powerful, and he paid attention to you when you needed it. Of course you're curious. But curiosity about people like Alexander Russo can be dangerous. He said I had a choice, that what happens next is up to me. And what do you want to happen next?" Emily looked out at the bean, at her distorted reflection in its mirrored surface. Who was she? Who did she want to be? Those questions had seemed so clear just 2 days ago. Now everything felt uncertain, like the ground had shifted beneath her feet and she was still trying to find her balance. "I don't know," Emily admitted, "but I think I need to find out." Monday morning arrived with the kind of gray, drizzly weather that made Chicago feel like it was wrapped in a damp blanket. Emily stood in front of her closet, staring at her clothes as if they might somehow provide guidance for how to handle returning to campus as the girl from the video. She'd barely slept again. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Alexander's intense gaze, heard his words about different worlds colliding, felt the phantom weight of his hand at her waist. It was ridiculous. She'd spent maybe 30 minutes total in his presence, and yet he'd somehow lodged himself in her thoughts like a splinter she couldn't remove. "You're going to be fine," Jessica said from the doorway, though her voice lacked conviction. "Just keep your head down, get through your classes, don't engage with anyone who wants to gossip." "Right," Emily said, pulling on jeans and a simple green sweater. Just a normal Monday. But the moment they stepped onto the DePaul campus in Lincoln Park, Emily knew there would be nothing normal about this day. She felt the stares immediately, clusters of students who went quiet when she passed, phones that suddenly appeared to capture photos or videos, whispered conversations that stopped mid-sentence. "Is that her? Can you believe Alexander Russo actually danced with her? I heard she's dating him now. No way. I heard it was just a one-time thing to mess with Vanessa." Emily kept her eyes forward, her jaw tight. Jessica walked close beside her, a protective presence that Emily was grateful for. They made it to the liberal arts building and up to Emily's first class, educational psychology with Professor Matthews. The moment Emily walked through the door, the room went silent. 20 pairs of eyes fixed on her, and Emily felt heat creeping up her neck. She took her usual seat in the third row, pulling out her laptop with hands that wanted to shake. "Miss Parker," Professor Matthews said, looking up from his desk. He was a kind man in his 50s, known for his patience with students. "Glad to see you this morning. Shall we begin?" The class proceeded normally, though Emily could feel the weight of attention on her throughout the entire hour. When Professor Matthews asked a question about Piaget's stages of cognitive development, Emily raised her hand automatically, then hesitated, remembering Vanessa's mocking words about always raising her hand. But she forced herself to keep it up, to answer when called on, to refuse to let fear change who she was. Between classes, Emily's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Building C, 3rd floor. Everything clear. V. Vincent." Alexander's man, reporting on her protection detail. Emily looked around the hallway trying to spot whoever was watching her, but saw no one obvious. "They're very good at being invisible," Alexander had said. Apparently he hadn't been exaggerating. "Emily! Emily, wait up!" She turned to see Marcus jogging toward her, his expression concerned. Behind him she spotted several other students slowing down, clearly trying to eavesdrop. "Hey," Marcus said, slightly out of breath. "I just wanted to check on you. After Saturday night and everything that happened, how are you holding up?" "I'm fine," Emily said automatically. "Are you really? Because the whole campus is talking about you. There are like 5 different theories circulating about why Alexander Russo was at that party and why he singled you out. He didn't single me out. He saw someone having a bad night and did something kind. That's it." Marcus lowered his voice. "Emily, people like Alexander Russo don't do kind things without reason. I'm not trying to freak you out, but you need to be careful. My older brother works in the DA's office, and he says the Russo family has been under investigation for years." Emily felt her stomach tighten. Investigation for what? Money laundering? Racketeering? Influence peddling? Take your pick. They're careful. They're smart. And they've never been caught, but everyone knows what they really are. Marcus paused, his expression genuinely worried. "I like you, Emily. You're a good person. I'd hate to see you get pulled into something you can't handle." "I appreciate the concern," Emily said, "but I barely know Alexander Russo. One dance doesn't make me part of his world." "Maybe not," Marcus agreed, "but that video has linked your names together. And in Chicago, perception is reality." After Marcus left, Emily made her way to the student teaching seminar, her mind churning. Money laundering, racketeering. Those weren't just rumors or speculation. Those were actual criminal investigations. What had she gotten herself into? The seminar was small, just 8 students preparing for their classroom observations. Emily tried to focus on the discussion about lesson planning and classroom management, but her attention kept drifting. Through the window she could see the quad, students hurrying between buildings in the light rain. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a call from the same unknown number Vincent had texted from. "Excuse me," Emily said to her professor. "I need to take this. It's important." She stepped into the hallway, her heart pounding. "Hello? Miss Parker, it's Vincent. I'm calling because we have a situation." Emily's mouth went dry. "What kind of situation?" "Nothing dangerous," Vincent assured her quickly. "But there's a reporter from the Chicago Tribune trying to contact you. They've called your apartment twice and sent an email to your university account. They want to interview you about your connection to Mr. Russo." "I don't have a connection to Mr. Russo." "Nevertheless, they believe you do. Mr. Russo wanted me to advise you. Do not speak to any reporters. Do not confirm or deny anything. If they approach you directly, simply say, 'No comment,' and walk away." "This is insane," Emily muttered. "Why would the Tribune care about a college student dancing with someone at a party?" "Because Mr. Russo is news," Vincent explained patiently. "He's notoriously private, rarely appears in public, and never with women. The fact that he not only appeared at a college party but danced with you, a relatively unknown person, is unusual enough to warrant attention." "Never with women," Emily repeated. "What does that mean?" Vincent hesitated. "Mr. Russo keeps his personal life extremely private. He's been photographed at business functions, charity galas, that sort of thing, but always alone. No dates, no companions. In Chicago society, that makes him something of an enigma." Emily leaned against the hallway wall, suddenly feeling overwhelmed. "I just wanted to go to a party. I just wanted to have a normal Saturday night. I understand this is difficult, Miss Parker, but it will pass. These things always do. In the meantime, Mr. Russo has instructed me to provide you with whatever assistance you need." After Vincent hung up, Emily stood in the empty hallway, listening to the muffled sounds of her seminar continuing without her. She should go back in, take notes, focus on her future career. But all she could think about was Alexander's world reaching into hers, pulling her deeper into something she didn't understand. The rest of Monday passed in a blur of stares, whispers, and uncomfortable attention. By the time Emily made it back to her apartment that evening, she was exhausted. Not physically, but emotionally drained from being constantly on display. Jessica had ordered pizza, and they ate in relative silence, both too tired to process the day. "My statistics professor asked me if you were really dating Alexander Russo," Jessica said finally. "My professor, a grown adult. I didn't even know how to respond." "What did you say?" "I said you were my roommate and my friend, and your personal life was none of anyone's business." Jessica paused. "But this isn't going away like Alexander said it would. It's getting bigger." She was right. Emily's Instagram had gained 3,000 followers in 2 days. Her mentions were flooded with everything from marriage proposals to death threats, people she'd never met who had decided they had strong opinions about her life. She'd made the account private, but screenshots of old photos were circulating anyway. Tuesday morning brought her student teaching observation, the practical exam where she would teach a real class while being evaluated by her supervising professor. Emily had been preparing for weeks, perfecting her lesson plan on American literature for a group of high school juniors. The school was Lincoln Park High, just a few blocks from campus. Emily arrived early, her materials organized, her nerves manageable. The supervising teacher, Mrs. Chen, greeted her warmly. "I'm looking forward to seeing your lesson, Emily. The students are excited to have a visiting teacher." But when Emily walked into the classroom, she immediately knew something was wrong. The students, about 25 of them, went silent, then erupted in whispers. Several pulled out their phones. "That's her. Oh my God, it is her. Miss Parker?" Mrs. Chen looked confused. "Is everything all right?" "I'm fine," Emily said, though her hands were trembling as she set her materials on the desk. She'd been so focused on her college campus that she hadn't considered that the video would spread to high schoolers too. She tried to start her lesson, a discussion about symbolism in The Great Gatsby, but the students were barely paying attention. They kept looking at their phones, whispering to each other, stealing glances at her. Finally, a bold student in the back raised his hand. "Miss Parker, is it true you're dating a Mafia boss?" The classroom erupted in excited chatter. Mrs. Chen immediately stood up. "That's enough. That question is completely inappropriate. Miss Parker is here to teach you about literature, not to discuss her personal life." But the damage was done. Emily tried to continue, tried to redirect their attention to Gatsby's green light and the corruption of the American dream, but she'd lost them. Every answer she called on was half-hearted. Every discussion question met with distracted responses. When the bell finally rang, Emily felt like she'd survived a trial rather than taught a lesson. Mrs. Chen approached her with a sympathetic expression. "I'm sorry about that. Teenagers can be thoughtless. For what it's worth, your lesson plan was excellent. The execution was just compromised by circumstances beyond your control." Beyond your control. The phrase echoed in Emily's mind as she left the school. Nothing felt within her control anymore. Her life had become something that happened to her, rather than something she directed. Her phone rang. Vincent again. "Miss Parker, I'm nearby. Mr. Russo would like to know if you're available for a brief meeting." "Now? I just finished my teaching observation and it was a disaster." "I'm sorry to hear that. Perhaps that's all the more reason to meet with Mr. Russo. He may be able to help." Emily almost laughed. "Help? He's the reason my observation was a disaster. His presence in my life is ruining everything." There was a pause. Then Vincent said quietly, "Mr. Russo anticipated you might feel that way. He's waiting at Cafe Jumping Bean, 2 blocks from your location. He asks for 10 minutes of your time." Emily should have said no. She should have gone home, called her mother, eaten ice cream and cried about her ruined observation. But instead she found herself walking toward the cafe, her feet carrying her forward while her brain screamed at her to turn around. The Cafe Jumping Bean was a small, cozy coffee shop that Emily had been to dozens of times. It was usually crowded with students and locals, but when she walked in, she found it mysteriously empty except for Alexander, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee already waiting. "You cleared out the cafe?" Emily said without preamble. "I rented it for an hour," Alexander replied calmly. "I thought you might prefer privacy for this conversation." Emily sat down across from him, anger and frustration bubbling up. "My student teaching observation was ruined today. Ruined because the students were more interested in gossiping about you than learning about literature. This is what you've done to my life. Alexander listened without interrupting, his dark eyes never leaving her face. When she finished, he nodded slowly. You're right. My involvement in your life has caused complications I didn't fully anticipate. For that, I apologize. Apologizing doesn't fix it. No, Alexander agreed. But perhaps I can help in other ways. How? Unless you can erase people's memories or make that video disappear, I don't see how you can help. Alexander took a sip of his coffee, considering. Tell me about your observation. What was the lesson? Why does that matter? Humor me. Emily sighed. Symbolism in The Great Gatsby. I was going to discuss how Fitzgerald uses the green light, the eyes of Dr. T.J. Eckelberg, and the Valley of Ashes to explore themes of aspiration, moral decay, and the corruption of the American dream. And the students weren't interested? They were interested in whether I'm dating you, Emily said bitterly. Alexander was quiet for a moment. What if you leaned into it? What? The students wanted to discuss perception, reputation, and how public image shapes reality. That's not so far from what Fitzgerald was exploring in Gatsby. The difference between who Jay Gatsby really was and who he presented himself to be. The way society judged him based on rumors and speculation rather than truth. Emily stared at him. Are you seriously suggesting I turn my viral video into a teaching moment? Why not? You have a captive audience of young people fascinated by the intersection of perception and reality. Use that. Make them think critically about why they care more about gossip than substance. Make them examine their own assumptions. Despite herself, Emily felt her mind beginning to work through the possibilities. It was actually a brilliant angle, one she never would have considered on her own. Mrs. Chen would never approve that lesson, then propose it as a supplementary discussion, a modern parallel to Fitzgerald's themes. Alexander leaned forward slightly. Emily, you can't make this situation go away, but you can control how you respond to it. You can be the victim of circumstance, or you can be someone who turns circumstances into opportunities. Is that what you do? Turn circumstances into opportunities? Every single day, Alexander said. It's how I've survived in my world. Emily looked at him, really looked at him, trying to understand what kind of man he was. Not the rumors or the reputation, but the actual person sitting across from her. She saw intelligence in his eyes, yes, but also something else. A loneliness, maybe, or a weariness that came from always having to be careful, always having to calculate. Why do you care? Emily asked quietly. Why does it matter to you whether my teaching observation went well, or whether I learned to handle this attention? You've apologized. You've offered protection. You could just walk away and let me deal with the consequences on my own. Alexander was silent for so long that Emily thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower, more personal than she'd heard it before. When I was 22, I made choices that closed certain doors for me permanently. I chose power over possibility, security over freedom. I don't regret those choices. They made me who I am. But sometimes I wonder what my life would have looked like if I'd chosen differently. He paused. You're at a crossroads right now, Emily. This situation has pushed you to a place where you have to decide who you want to be. I care because I see potential in you that you haven't recognized yet, and I'd hate to see you make choices out of fear rather than strength. Emily felt something shift in her chest, a recognition that this conversation was about more than a ruined observation or an unwanted video. This was about the fundamental question she'd been avoiding. Who did she want to be? I don't know how to be strong in this situation, she admitted. You start by refusing to hide him, Alexander said. You go back to that school, you teach that supplementary lesson, and you show those students, and yourself, that you're more than a viral moment. You're a person with thoughts and ideas worth hearing. And if that doesn't work, then you try something else. And you keep trying until something does work. That's what strength is, Emily. Not never falling down, but getting back up every single time. Emily picked up her coffee cup, warming her hands on the ceramic. Outside, the rain had started again, drops streaking down the cafe windows. Somewhere in the city, people were living normal lives, unaffected by viral videos or mafia rumors or unexpected conversations with dangerous men. But Emily was beginning to realize that her normal life had been a kind of prison. Safe, yes, but also limiting. Maybe Alexander was right. Maybe this situation, as uncomfortable as it was, represented an opportunity to become someone more than she'd allowed herself to be. I'll think about your suggestion, Emily said finally. About the supplementary lesson. Alexander nodded, standing up. That's all I ask. And Emily, for what it's worth, I think you're going to be an excellent teacher. The kind who challenges students to think rather than just memorize. The kind who matters. He left money on the table for the coffee and walked toward the door. His security detail materialized from somewhere, flanking him as he stepped out into the rain. Emily sat alone in the empty cafe, her mind spinning with possibilities. She pulled out her laptop and opened a blank document. At the top she typed, "Perception versus Reality, a modern look at Gatsby's themes." And then, slowly at first, but with growing confidence, she began to write. 3 weeks later, Emily stood in front of Mrs. Chen's classroom once more. The autumn sun streamed through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the rows of desks where 25 high school juniors waited with varying degrees of interest. This time, Emily wasn't nervous. She was ready. "Good morning," she began, her voice clear and steady. "Last time I was here, many of you had questions about my personal life, questions about a video that went viral, about my connection to someone in the news. Today I'm going to answer those questions, but not in the way you expect." She had their attention now. Every phone was down, every eye focused on her. "We're going to talk about perception versus reality, and how public image shapes the way we understand people. We're going to examine how easily rumors replace truth, and how society creates narratives that may have nothing to do with actual facts." Emily clicked to her first slide. "And we're going to use 2 case studies, Jay Gatsby from the novel you're reading, and me." A ripple of surprise moved through the classroom. Mrs. Chen, observing from the back, leaned forward with interest. For the next 40 minutes, Emily guided the students through a discussion that was part literary analysis, part media literacy, and part personal reflection. She talked about how Gatsby constructed an elaborate persona to hide his true origins. She compared it to how social media allows people to curate identities that may not reflect reality. She asked the students to examine their own assumptions about her based solely on a 30-second video. "Who do you think I am?" Emily asked the class. "Based on that video, based on rumors you've heard, based on the stories people have created, who am I?" The answers came slowly at first, then faster. Rich, connected, lucky, dating a powerful man, living an exciting life. "Now let me tell you who I actually am," Emily said. "I'm a 22-year-old student teacher who works part-time at a campus bookstore to pay rent. I have student loans that terrify me. I've never traveled outside the United States. I was having the worst night of my life when that video was taken. I'd just been publicly humiliated at a party. The man in the video? I've spoken to him exactly 3 times. We are not dating. We are not friends. He was simply a stranger who did something kind when I needed it." The classroom was completely silent now. "So here's what I want you to understand," Emily continued. "Every person you meet has a real story that's almost always more complicated than whatever you assume about them. Gatsby's tragedy wasn't that he failed to win Daisy. It was that no one ever saw the real James Gats underneath the carefully constructed image. Don't let that be your tragedy. Don't let that be how you treat other people." When the bell rang, the students filed out quietly, several stopping to thank Emily for the lesson. One girl, a shy student who hadn't spoken during the entire discussion, approached her desk. "Miss Parker, that was really brave. Thank you for being honest with us." After the students left, Mrs. Chen approached with a broad smile. "Emily, that was exceptional. You took a difficult situation and transformed it into something meaningful. I'm going to recommend you for early certification consideration." Emily felt warmth spreading through her chest. "Thank you. That means everything." Walking back to campus, Emily's phone buzzed. A text from Vincent. "Mr. Russo wanted me to inform you that the protection detail is being scaled back. The media attention has substantially decreased. You should be able to resume normal activities without concern." Emily stopped walking, reading the message twice. This was it then. The situation was resolving itself, just as Alexander had predicted. Soon it would be nothing more than a strange story she'd tell at parties. "Remember that time I went viral for dancing with a mysterious stranger?" But instead of feeling relieved, Emily felt something else. Disappointment? Regret? She found herself typing a response. "Can you give me Mr. Russo's direct number?" Vincent's reply came quickly. "I'll need to ask his permission. Stand by." 5 minutes later, her phone rang. Not Vincent this time, but a different number. "Miss Parker." Alexander's voice was exactly as she remembered. Deep, controlled, with that hint of an accent. "I heard the protection detail is ending," Emily said. "The immediate threat has passed." You're no longer trending on social media, the reporter has moved on to other stories, and campus gossip has shifted to other topics. You're safe to resume your normal life. Right. Normal life. Emily sat down on a bench overlooking the quad. I wanted to say thank you. For everything. The protection, the advice about the lesson, the coffee that day. You were right. I couldn't make the situation disappear, but I could control how I responded to it. I'm glad the lesson went well. Mrs. Chen sent word through certain channels that you exceeded expectations. Emily blinked. You have channels to a high school English teacher? I have channels to most places in Chicago, Alexander said, and she could hear the slight amusement in his voice. They were both quiet for a moment. Emily knew she should say goodbye, thank him one final time, and let this strange chapter of her life close. But she found herself asking instead, why did you really help me? The truth this time, not the version you thought I needed to hear. Alexander sighed, and it was such a human sound, tired and honest. Because when I saw you on those steps, you reminded me of someone I used to know, someone who had potential but didn't believe in themselves, someone who needed a push to see what they could become. Who? Me, Alexander said quietly. A very long time ago. Emily felt her throat tighten. What happened to that person? He made choices. Some good, some necessary, some he wishes he could take back. But he survived, and he built something, and occasionally he gets to help people who remind him of who he used to be. I don't think I'm anything like you, Emily said. No, Alexander agreed. You're better. You still have choices I don't. You still have the chance to build a life that doesn't require protection details and calculated appearances and constant vigilance. Don't waste that chance, Emily. She heard finality in his voice. This was goodbye. Will I see you again? The question escaped before she could stop it. Unlikely. Our worlds collided briefly, as I said they would, but they're drifting apart again, as they should. You belong in classrooms teaching students to think critically. I belong, he paused, elsewhere. Alexander? Yes? Thank you for the dance. She could hear the smile in his voice. You're welcome. Goodbye, Emily Parker. The line went dead. Emily sat on the bench as the afternoon sun painted the campus in shades of gold and amber. Students hurried past, focused on exams and papers and all the normal concerns of college life. In a few months, she'd graduate. She'd get her teaching certificate. She'd start her career helping young people discover literature and critical thinking. Her phone buzzed one final time. A text from an unknown number. You're going to do remarkable things. Emily saved the number under the stranger, knowing she'd probably never use it but wanting to preserve this moment somehow. Then she stood up, shouldered her bag, and walked toward her next class. Behind her, unseen in the crowd, a figure in a dark jacket watched until she disappeared into the liberal arts building. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. She's clear. Detail can withdraw. Vincent pocketed his phone and walked away, leaving Emily Parker to the normal life she'd earned. And somewhere across the city, in an office overlooking Lake Michigan, Alexander Russo stood at a window and wondered if he'd made the right choice letting her go. But he knew he had. Some people were meant for his world, shaped by its demands and its darkness. Emily Parker was meant for light. He turned back to his desk, to the contracts and the meetings and the careful calculations that defined his existence. The strange interlude was over. He would never forget the girl who'd reminded him of who he used to be, but he would never see her again. That was how it had to be.